You are listening to the On Purpose podcast, your guide to living a more purposeful life. Although we're recording here from the On Purpose Airstream Studios, you may notice something different. That's right, we flipped the script this week. I'm Bodin. I'm your host for the week, and I'm an avid listener to the show. And just like you, a fan of our boy, Jerrod Hardy. I love the solo episodes Jerrod does so much that I asked him if I could guest host and interview him. Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest is a MMA fighter, baseball player enthusiast. He's served in the Air Forces. He uses his business skills to raise money for charity. He's a retired member of the police force. He's a teacher, a coach, an author, a public speaker, and a ukulele extraordinaire. He's someone I'm pleased to call a friend, and he hosts this here On Purpose podcast, creating a community of listeners to which I am one of. Jerrod, welcome to your own show.
Wow, man, that's quite the intro. I'm impressed with that. I don't know if you had to collaborate with my mom or not, because I think people's moms usually write the best intros. That was very good.
No, I unfortunately have not met your mom yet.
Yeah, we'll have to fix that.
Yeah, I've heard she's a wonderful lady.
I'm blessed, man, blessed. It says, when you sent me the message to flip this and do it, I was like, wow, this is going to be fun. But I will tell you, I feel more pressure not being in control of the questions than I do on the other side.
Well, you know, you don't just become the captain of a boat by jumping on a yacht and driving. So today we're going to start out with some refreshers to get our boats going, so to speak. If you were stranded on a desert island, what food are you excited to have with you?
Pizza for sure.
Pizza?
Yeah.
Pepperoni, cheese, what?
I'll probably do it all.
Yeah?
Yeah, supreme. That way, if I'm feeling a little heavy, I pick the meats off and only eat the veggies. If I'm feeling like I need more protein, I have all the meats.
Yeah, I actually think that's a great answer because carbs, like that's one of the things you're just going to be missing if you're on a desert island.
Yeah, I'm going to be burning through it because I'm going to be running around trying to get myself off the island. So then I can replenish it with all the pizza nutrients.
Yeah. Listeners, one of my favorite things about this question is when someone says fish, because if you're on a desert island, you already got access to fish.
So why would you take it?
That blows my mind.
Yeah, one of my favorites was Scott Savage, who said he was going to take agave so he could make tequila.
Ah, okay, man, after my own heart.
There you go.
Yeah. Now, if you had a superpower, what would it be and why?
This is one I really, really wish I had, and it's kind of the premise of the podcast, to be honest with you, and that is I wish I could touch people and just immediately see them how everybody else sees them, right? And touch them to see what's possible and let them see like the abundance in their life and what they could become if only they would choose to believe in themselves a little more. Okay. And that's one of the reasons I do the podcast, is to allow people to share their story and understand that all of our stories have value and can create impact in the world if only, one, we believe in our story, and then two, we're willing to share our stories.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Thanks, man. I've had a lot of time to think about it.
I bet you do. I bet every time you're asking these
I
questions.
do. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I even think, dude, like I'll research for guests, and I'll be like, oh, this would be a great superpower for their passion. And then when they answer, I'm like, oh, man, I think I have a better one for you, but I don't want to share it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Now, speaking of the podcast, if you could interview anyone on the podcast, alive or dead today, who would it be?
Oh, man, I would, two people that would come to mind, but for sure I'd go with my grandma Jean. She passed away when Trey was 3 months old, and she is the source of my mom's ability to just love overwhelmingly and unconditionally, and my mom's like the cheerleader of all cheerleaders for anybody in the world. Like if you think you can do something, you're not sure, you need somebody else to believe in you, call my mom. She's going to believe for a bunch of people for you. And my grandma was that person first. And I would just want to let her see our family and see what we've created, and just I know I should be proud because she was always proud, but I would just love to hear what she thinks of what we created.
Well, speaking of Grandma Jean, listening and reading through your first book there, you talk about Grandma Jean, and you talk about how you guys are out having lunch, and she's like taking the silverware, she's maybe taking the ketchup bottle, and I had a Grandma Jean too.
Was her name Jean?
No,
okay.
She wasn't Jean.
Same role player.
Oh, the same thing. Everywhere we go, we'd be filling our pockets with ketchup packets and salt shakers and anything that wasn't nailed down. And it's that Depression era mentality that that generation had.
But what I loved about it was you tipped well first so that the young man or woman that was serving you got paid, and then you took all the stuff on the table. You didn't take the table stuff and not tip. So yeah, we would tip very, very well. You thank them for their time, and as soon as they left, you would take the ketchup, the mustard, the salt, the sugar, the pepper, any unused silverware. and it was funny, though, is my grandma was such a love and, like, light-hearted, giving person. You never even thought it was wrong. You thought it was just what you were supposed to do.
That was the same for me. Same situation for me. Now, what is your favorite book?
I had to get this out because it's The Way of the Wild Heart.
Okay.
A Map for the Masculine Journey. And this is something I've recently read like 4 or 5 times, and I go back to it all the time because it really helped me understand mistakes I made as a parent towards Trey. And how in our society a lot of issues stem from young men not going through the mature masculine male journey and fulfilling all the roles that are expected of us in society. And one of my friends from the gym asked me to read this because I was coaching a lot of different people from different backgrounds, and it was a way to relate to see where they were at in their journey. But when I read it, I started reflecting on me, and as a dad, like, man, I missed this opportunity with my son where he was trying to show his power, and we should have embraced him more and done some things different. But I'm just blessed that the book came to me at a stage in life where I can still recorrect and redirect and share this with Trey. And I've given this book out to so many dads now, especially of sons, that I think it's one of the ways we can just parent better and raise better young men.
Well, that's exciting to hear. I'm going to have to check that book out, and I think we're going to circle back about masculinity a little bit further down the line here, because I think there's some pretty interesting aspects that I respect about you as a person when it comes to masculinity. But moving forward with the opening questions here, what is a standout episode of the On Purpose podcast that you've had?
Well, obviously the one with you and Mella was fantastic. And I'll never forget when I asked you the warm-up question, who do you want to have dinner with and what do you want to ask them? And you said Abe Lincoln and pass the gravy.
Pass the potatoes.
Pass the potatoes.
Yeah.
And that was hilarious. And actually, we got a lot of feedback from listeners that thought that was one of the best answers ever. So that was fun. And what I really loved about the episode with you guys was we did it in the Airstream in the middle of Quartzsite Desert. And it was full circle. We had randomly met each other, struck up a friendship. We had a lot of commonality. We had a lot of differences. And it was just fun to have conversations with you guys. And to be able to share that with the world and get them to see, like, people pass our lives all the time. And there's so much we can learn from them if we slow down, just open our eyes and our hearts to see what they have to offer. So that was a great episode. And then I would go to episode 200 with Zach Mercurio. He's a PhD that studies purpose and mattering. And when he told me that you can't have purpose in life until you realize you first matter, that was profound to me. And I started really, like, thinking on this and watching other people in the world and realizing, like, yeah, everybody wants to have purpose, and purpose is a big buzzword. But until you matter, until you know you matter, that's the foundation for everything else. And when you start talking about people that don't realize they matter, become anti-mattering, and then they act out, and they're violent, and they're seeking validity from all these other sources, when really they got to realize they matter. And how do you let people know you matter? right? Saying like, Don, thank you for being here. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be able to do this, or I wouldn't have had this experience. And it just struck with me that how easy it is to let people know they matter in the world if we'll just be intentional about recognizing people.
Well, that's pretty inspirational. I think myself and probably many others listening are going to go back up and make sure they download episode 200 then to check that one out.
And I have to look. Zach came, he was one of my first guests way back, probably episode 53, 54. Mm-hmm. And then he was such a great guest, and I learned so much from him. I actually have his book, The Invisible Leader, which is a fantastic book as well. And he was so good, and I thought so much about him as I read that book and went back that I was like, okay, episode 200, I want a special guest. And it was the first time I ever brought somebody back twice.
Except for now.
Yeah. Yeah, except for now. That's a good one.
Now, as a former MMA fighter, mm-hmm. You don't just get up one morning and jump in the ring. You're preparing for months, if not weeks, or mm-hmm. weeks, if not months,
yep.
before getting in the ring. You have rituals you do. You change your diet. What are you doing for rituals or tools to prep you for your podcasts?
That's a great question. Learning. Staying curious, like that most recent episode I put out, just staying curious. Like I'm literally challenging whatever beliefs I have or whatever information is coming to me to try to find other sources of information. Somebody that maybe believes differently, somebody whose experience was vastly different, so that I can learn from them. And I think that's probably one of the greatest gifts of getting older, traveling, and having the podcast is I realize I don't know anything. So I want to learn as much as I can from all the people I'm going to meet. And then the podcast is just an avenue that I can learn for me, but I can also share it for those that want to learn as well. So I think staying curious. And then the other thing is taking of people's time, like taking your time to come on an episode. I owe it to you to be prepared. So I'm going to research you, and I'm going to look into you, and I'm going to really... What I love doing is finding parts of somebody's story that they didn't realize was a great part of their story. But to me, I want to know more about it and ask them a question that they didn't know was coming, not to catch them off guard, but to realize like, wow, Grandma Jean stealing all the stuff at the diner is actually a cool story. And there's somebody else that has a Grandma Jean. And then we're starting to build threads of commonality in people. And I think that's so important. So just valuing their time, showing up prepared, and really making sure that they understand the importance of their own story.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Are you feeling warmed up?
Oh, I'm warmed up. Okay, yeah, I'm excited. This is the first time on this side. This is fun.
Now, we're going to reflect back on your book first. There's a lot of stuff in there, I think, that's real important. And knowing you personally and reading the book, I get a real sense of transformation, of constantly growing, constantly evolving. The beginning of the podcast, I had mentioned all these different roles you've taken on, whether it's being a businessman focused on raising money for charity, or MMA fighter, or being in the force, or a teacher, a public speaker. These are all roles in which, thinking back 30 years ago, we would have known our grandparents having one of these roles for 45 years, and then they'd retire. How has what's really inspired you, or what is inspiring you to keep finding new roles to take on and transforming yourself?
Man, well, and I've probably told this story so many times, but I can't reemphasize enough, is my mom, right? Being born, my mom was 16 when she was pregnant with me, 17 when she had me, giving up every dream she had in life, every possibility, being told like what a mistake this could be, to keep me. I just was born, I think maybe because of that relationship, because she was so young and I was so little, that we grew up together. From the time I was young, I knew I had to live a special life because she didn't get to experience a lot of things maybe she wanted to by sacrificing to keep me. And our life's been great, but I've always known that I want to experience as much as I can because just like my grandma Jean and my mom, they experience things through me. And I get to bring it back to them and share. And it's almost like we get to do all this together. And I just never wanted at the end of her life for her to have any doubt that that sacrifice was worth it.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like young mother, young child. Do you get any residuals from the Gilmore Girls series since you've inspired it basically with your story here?
Honestly, I have no idea what that show is, and no, unfortunately, I get no mailbox money from that. But again, I must have missed the opportunity to write a script about it.
Yeah,
Dang
very
it.
much so. But that experience does seem like it sets you up that, you know, seeing your parent or parents sacrificing for you just to be there when they do have other choices.
They do. And it was a tough time, you know. I mean, this is the early 70s. We're coming off the tumultuous 60s. There's a lot of uncertainty in the future of everything. And, you know, and she was, you know, she's in small town Montana, pretty isolated out there. Like, it's not the cutting edge of society, so the thinking's a little limited. So for her to do what she did, and you know, one of my favorite memories is still the birthday I had with the 5 cakes and the fire trucks nearby, and wondering why I had so many cakes, but it was such a great birthday. And it was until years later when I brought that memory up to her that I realized I was in her GED class with her, and there was a bunch of other teenage moms that were also in there taking classes, and that she was trying to finish high school, but we didn't have daycare, so I went to school with her. And I'm like, man, that's a crazy memory because it was one of my best birthdays.
Now, there's something, I think it's in that same chapter in your book that you're talking about, which probably was the standout thing that hit me, which is you say something in the way of, I decided that I was not going to settle for an average life.
Mm-hmm.
Were those things that, was that a phrase or was that a feeling that you got just from your childhood and your experiences there?
Yeah, I've just known it as long as I can remember, having thoughts about what kind of life I want to have and what kind of world I want to create around me. I've never wanted to be average in anything. And quite honestly, Don, I'll be perfectly transparent with you. It didn't always serve me. At times, my desire to not be average, I was arrogant. I was overly confident. I was mean to people. I didn't necessarily take time to include people in my circle that were content with being average because I for whatever reason felt that would hold me back from whatever I wanted to do. And while it's always been a mindset of mine to not be average, like I want to excel at what I'm doing, I think, like you said earlier, the transformation of, okay, what does not being average look like now versus when I was 20 or in my teens, right? Back then it meant like I was trying to get ahead. And I wasn't graceful. I didn't have a lot of gratitude. I wasn't as good a person as I could have been because I was so singularly focused on not being average. Whereas now, not being average looks different.
Yeah.
You know, and so I am grateful that I've had that journey. But yeah, since I was little, I mean, my mom used to get notes from teachers and in school because I would literally spend hours practicing my autograph because I was pretty sure I was going to sign baseball cards for the rest of my life. And I would literally, like, my books. Do you remember, like, textbooks? You'd cover them with the brown paper bag.
Yeah.
My brown paper bag, I would get in trouble because my brown paper bag would be nothing but my name. I would practice all my autographs with my number, without my number, Cat Big J, Little J, I had all this system going. And but it just was always like, okay, I'm going to do something good in the world. And, you know, I don't know what it is yet, but I'm still searching for it.
Yeah, well, I think you're doing a lot of good in the world. Now, talking about when you're younger, Now, talking about when you were younger, there was a game called Fight the White Boy.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Do you feel like I know there was a turning point when it sounds like you were kind of just getting beaten up at school.
Yeah.
And you were being bussed out to maybe a rougher school than
Much rougher.
the area you were in.
Mm-hmm.
As an adult, I don't know if it's out of nowhere. I don't know the backstory, but you decided to do MMA fighting. And it sounds like a lot of it was because you had a physical challenge you wanted to meet, but also you could raise some money for veterans and charities. Did you see any link between these Fight the White Boy and being an MMA fighter?
I didn't, to be honest with you. That time in my life when I moved to the school there and fought every day at recess until I finally stood up for myself, I wouldn't change that. Like, I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't particularly fun. But it wasn't until, I don't know how many fights I went through where I'd fight back just enough to try to gain some respect, but not really to win, because I was afraid if I won, what would happen? Would they all jump me? Like, I didn't know. And it wasn't until the day I decided, like, I was done with this. I'm going to stand up for myself, because clearly just trying to acquiesce and just blend in isn't working either. So I'll at least take ownership of what I have. And I fought back. But that chapter was that was young Jerrod trying to deal with, and it was great because I learned that if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to believe in you. And if you don't want to get picked on, here, you got to stand up for yourself. And it kind of propelled me in life. So I never saw a parallel to MMA fighting. What I will tell you that a lot of people don't realize is I never did any individual sports. Like, I always played team sports. So win or lose, you can blend in with the team. It's always somebody else's fault, maybe a little bit your fault, maybe not always. But Trey and Taya and Driana, my kids, all did individual sports. They were dancing, they were gymnasts, they were wrestlers. And even though I was a very involved dad, talking to them about performance anxiety and like overcoming stress and fear and all this, I had never really done it. And I'm a big believer in, if I'm going to take advice from somebody, you better have done it. And it was a good time in our life there for me to step forward. I was 42 years old. I had been training for like 20 years. It worked in the gym. It worked with training partners. But I always wondered, like, could I walk out in front of the thousands of people, get in a cage, and actually do it when it mattered? And more importantly, could my kids and Andrea see me take that risk, be willing to put all the chips on the table, bet on myself, and what would we learn from the process? So I never fought in MMA. I never fought angry. I never fought like I had to prove something to anybody else. It was proven to me. And that's what I always try to tell people is, like, your opponent every day is you. It's always trying to be one thing better than you were 10 minutes ago, one thing better than you were a day ago. The opponent in the cage, that's your test. And so many times we look at people in life that are enemies or opponents. And I'm like, no, don't look at them. I look at them as a test. Like, they're here to test me in some way. They're here to teach me, for me to teach them, to learn, to share. And even though people think fighting, some people say, oh, it's barbaric, it's this, it's that. Man, to me, it was as much about learning who I am and as it was physical. And that's probably the biggest thing is most of what you see from professional fighting, you see the physical aspect. But I will tell you, going through that journey for 4 years, fighting frequently, 90% of what you don't see is mental and heart. And that's what really makes the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, both fighting in MMA and unfortunately being bullied when you were younger. Those are two chapters in your book. Is it Extraordinary People, Ordinary?
Extraordinary People in Ordinary Places.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one thing I found, that entire book is all about, I think the theme there is, it's just all about these mentorships you had. You kept finding the inspiration and ways to be grateful and ways to learn in somebody who would step up to just without anything asking for, to give you some of that mentorship, which really would catapult you in different directions. I don't know if I actually have a question there, but it just seemed like it was all about mentorship.
And it was, and one of the themes I hope people get across from that is it's all around us. It wasn't that I was blessed to have a family of great financial means that sent me to this boarding school or this leadership school. It was just literally, I chose to stop and reflect on who's giving me in life, who's in my life right now, what am I learning? And I think it's really, even without me knowing it at the younger age in my life, it's really kind of what I've gone even more openly about now, is just taking a minute to appreciate all the people around me, because they're all there for a reason. Your paths are crossing for a reason. And if we slow down and recognize, and that's, some people are like, oh, you were lucky to have this coach or lucky to have this or that. I'm like, I don't think I was luck. I think it was, we're supposed to meet. We're supposed to cross paths. And fortunately, I was open enough to learn. But now here's the other thing, Don, that I can't tell you. How many other people crossed my paths when I was being stubborn and closed off and arrogant and conceited and not willing to learn, that I missed? Right? The thing about, I'm 50 years old. That book has 12 chapters, I think.
That's not even one a year.
Not even 1 year. So how many did I miss?
Yep.
Right? And yeah, I want to reflect on those, but I also want to go whoa, okay, I got to pay attention better now because I missed some. And I think that's a lesson I hope people, if they read the book, listen to the book, they take away is, okay, let me stop right now and look around in my world. Who should I say thanks to? And, you read the book, Bruce. It was one of the most impactful people in my life. And
just came over and picked you up?
Picked me up, scared the shit out of me, kicked me out.
Children's hospital? Is that correct?
Took me to the children's hospital and then the Orioles game. And on a Sunday, came to my house. And I never thanked him. I don't even know his last name. So that's one of the reasons I love telling the story of Bruce, is that if he's out there, maybe he stumbles across. Maybe the universe aligns again, our paths cross, whether it's on this podcast or a book. And he's like, wow, I did make a difference. Because there's so many people just like Bruce investing in people around the world that we don't say thanks at the time because we're just not wise enough, 12-year-old Jerrod just didn't know how important this moment was going to be. But now I can say thanks.
Now, you talk a little bit about being in the force and looking at moving to Fort Collins, which you guys did do. You were in Wyoming at the time? Montana?
Yeah.
Montana, moving to Fort Collins, Colorado. Did you have any idea that it was one of the 11th best quality of life places to live at the time?
No, honestly, much like most of my life, Andrea and I each realized we didn't want to stay in Montana. We didn't really particularly enjoy the harshness of the winter, and it was tough to raise a family economically. So we each picked a place. I picked San Jose, California. She picked Fort Collins, Colorado, because she had family nearby. And I pretty much follow what she says. So we ended up at Fort Collins. And caveat, usually what she researches and does turns out pretty good for us. So I have no regrets.
Yeah, I talked to her a little bit just to get a little background on that. And she was saying that you were really excited about San Jose, but, you guys had just gotten out of, being in a bad place financially.
Yeah.
And she was looking at, in San Jose, you might have got an okay salary, but not okay in San Jose. It was going to put you back into scraping by again.
It was, yeah. And not only that, it would have, the quality of life would have been, it would have been selfish for my career because there was a ton of opportunities at a much bigger place, but it wouldn't have been good for our kids. It wouldn't have been good for her. And yeah, she's absolutely right. We'd have been trading off professional potential success, but I'm missing kids' sports. I'm missing athletic. I'm missing all the life that we're actually trying to provide to enjoy. So it worked out great. And yeah, she does a good job guiding my life many times.
Now, one thing I thought about as you had a career in the force, when I was getting ready to leave high school, I took SATs, and I don't even remember what the other ones are. But they also had this aptitude test I took. And I was curious if you took any of those, because mine said I could either be a forest ranger or, oh, I don't even remember what it was. It was two things that were just...
bank robber.
It was something like that. Yeah. Did you ever have one of those aptitude tests?
I did.
And what did they say that you would be good at?
I don't necessarily remember what it said I'd be good at. I remember what it said, do not ever even try, and that was any mechanical stuff.
Okay.
Like they were like, okay, dude, your scores, like, do not even look at a tool. Like, you need to stay away from anybody's toolbox. You're a danger to everybody. Yeah, I don't know what it said I'd be good at. And law enforcement wasn't something like I was a little kid. I'm like, this is what I want to do. I just kind of stumbled into it. Honestly, a lot like most of my life. I just kind of stumbled into something that I turned out to be okay at and that provided for our family. We got a stalker looking in the window. I love it. She was trying to hear what we were saying.
Yeah. We talked briefly about Bruce and how he changed. He really kind of changed your mindset. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about mindset in a minute, but before that time, you kind of characterize yourself as an angry young man, and I think that's something that all of us go through. Maybe not all of us, but a lot of us men go through this phase where it's almost easier to be angry, and there's a lot going on when you're that age. There's a lot of chemicals and whatnot going on. I guess, if there's a question in there, it's, did you see a clear point, like a clear turning point maybe, about how service and charity really is more fulfilling to yourself, to your being, that alters you from being that angry young man?
Yeah, I learned a couple lessons looking back on Bruce, and one that is really stood out to me is if you come across young people that are angry, it's usually because they don't know what else to do, right? Like, you're not just angry to be angry. You're angry because you're missing something. You're angry because you're coming up short somewhere. And so one of the lessons I really took from that is, okay, if I see somebody that's pushing back, if I see somebody that's isolating themselves, I don't want to join in the crowd that says, hey, look at them, they're different. I want to say, no, you get back in here. Let's go over. We're going to be part of that crowd. Because I can only imagine how easy it would have been to have dismissed me as a trouble kid that'll never amount to anything, blah, blah, blah. And potentially that's what I would have been. But he included me. He brought me in and showed me differences. And that's the thing that really I've tried to instill in my family and the people that I coach and I'm around is, you want to make a difference? Go get the people that don't think they matter anymore and bring them back. And you know, one analogy I use, everybody wants to coach an All-American. Right? Everybody wants to coach the guy that's just physically gifted. But you don't make much of a difference coaching somebody that's already good at it. You know, give me the people that nobody else wants. Give me the whole bunch. You pick all the kids you want on your team. I want all the kids nobody wants. That's where I'm going to make a difference. And that's what Bruce did for me, right? I was the kid nobody wanted. I was really good at sports. But my attitude was terrible. I was going to fight with people. I was going to argue with the coaches. I was not going to listen. I was going to be uncoachable. Yet he didn't see me for all of what I was right now. He saw me for, okay, wait a second. This kid's acting out. There's something missing. What can he become? Mm-hmm. And that's really the big thing I see as, okay, I can make a difference by just including people.
Now, we talked a little bit throughout this about a lot of stories that we've referenced are from the first book.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm really curious about is, do you have a second book in the works?
Yeah, we've pondered back and forth on that. Yeah, I definitely want to write again because honestly, when I did the audio book, so I wrote the book and then like 2 years later I did audio. And when I was going through it, I was like, dude, I could write it so much better today. which I think is cool, right? Because you're growing, you have progress. So yeah, I definitely want to work on a second book, and a lot of it I think will be like takeaways from the podcast and just bringing other people, like podcast interviews, stories to life in another format, because there's so many lessons to be learned. And again, I feel like maybe I missed a lot of people earlier in my life, and maybe I kind of can make up for it with the podcast now by getting lessons every single week.
Now, there's obviously a huge storyteller element throughout your life. I think when you were younger, you kind of got into storytelling and writing, and then obviously telling stories through the book. You're telling other people's stories through the podcast, and it sounds like from our brief talks that you're telling a lot of personal stories in your coaching, because I mean we both know stories are powerful.
Yeah.
Is that something that's always kind of in the back of your head, or is it just something that has become a part of how you function and communicate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think both. One, my dad was a great storyteller, and so that's a trait I got from him. He was a fantastic storyteller. Now, were they all truthful or not? Who knows? Who knows, right? But that's part of being a good storyteller, right? Like there's a little embellishment. My dad was a great storyteller, and he's a great public speaker. And so I definitely owe him credit for that, and I got that from him. So I think this is one of the things that I want people to at least ponder is I'm not really good at a lot in life, to be honest with you. I would say I'm as average gets. But what I'm really, really good at is what I'm good at. And what I mean by that is I've always believed in myself. So I believe in myself more. Like I'm really good at that. I'm not going to try to do all this other stuff. I'm going to focus on that. And then I know storytelling is something I'm good at, whether I'm writing it, speaking it, sharing it. So I try to double down on what I'm good at. And if I can get other people to believe in themselves a little more, and I can get them to see the power of story, and I know that we all connect through story. So if I really want to connect with people, the best way to do it is to have a story that connects you. Well, now the lessons I've learned, I can share. The lessons they've learned, I can absorb because the stories unite us. So I've always just been super cognizant of that. Because it's how I learn, right? Like if you sit down and tell me just data points and stuff, I'm not interested. But tell me the story behind the people, and that's what I want to know about.
Yeah, I think that's how stories inspire. Talking with your son Trey last night, he's talking about learning. He's saying, I can barely learn watching something. I need to get my hands on it, and that's the same thing with stories. Right. Storytelling it's just it's a tool that we as humans just connect with so easily. It's easier for me to learn from a story than it is if you just give the summary of what you're supposed to take away.
Right.
There's no emotional journey in that.
For sure. Yeah, the connection is the story.
Yes.
Right, and you see yourself in the story, and you see how it applies to your life, or how your life could be different if only you did things differently, or right, like that's why it's so scary to me, is if people want to censor things or to make certain information unavailable to you, right? Because then, well, you're not learning from that. Like I'm reading a book about the coyote, was it Coyote America? And it's talking about how the coyote was one of the very first gods ever documented through the Native Americans. And and it gives you stories of different Native American tribes and what they were talking about the coyote and how the coyote evolves. Well, that's history, right? And if I can read that and appreciate that, I can learn something from it. But if I don't know it's available and I can't get to it, then, well, how can I learn? And I just think we learn best from stories. We unite from stories. We see commonality through stories. We see our story and other people's stories. And ultimately, one of the things I love teaching, Don, is that if I know your story and I know a little bit about your background, I know, okay, you have a grandma Jean, I have a grandma Jean, I'm usually going to be more graceful for your shortcomings. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt versus looking skeptically at everything you do. Right? And when I know your story, I know why you're doing what you're doing. I know that you came from a teenage mom. I know that you had this incident as a kid that shaped you. When I give you grace. But when we don't know stories about each other, when we don't know who's behind the title, who's behind the position, who's behind the words, well, now it's easy to categorize you and put people in different boxes and look at only what we see as negative.
Yeah, and dismiss any other aspect
absolutely.
of learning more about them.
Yeah, and that's staying curious, right? Like, I want to know the stories behind the stories.
Well, one big part about your story that's been a huge help for me is that you're a nomad.
Yeah.
That the On Purpose podcast studio here in the Airstream is your home.
Yep.
And it may be parked just about anywhere.
Right.
For over 3 years now. It's in a different place all the time. And that's how we met.
Yeah.
So I guess what my take on that is, I'm curious to know, leaving Sticks and Bricks life, leaving that community that you had for so long where you raised your kids, being on the road, I see you and Andrea, and I know you guys have a great sense of balancing for time for yourself to evolve. Was that something you had before you were on the road, or is that something that you adapted and figured out how to live with and embrace?
Yeah, no, that's been growth. And I think Andrea would probably answer this better or more eloquently than I do, but I was a filler. And what I mean by that is I filled my days full. I filled my time full. Quite honestly, if her and I were having a struggle in a relationship, instead of sitting down and talking about it and making time, a lot of times we'd both just fill our schedule and move past, and we'll deal with it down the road. And coming out here in that first year, just the two of us in the Airstream, we were in the southeast United States. We had no family close, no distractions. It really forced us to look at our problems and look at the issues and to address them, and to realize how much happier we are and how much deeper our love can be when we actually handle small things instead of pushing them off. So that's been a growth that I didn't know was even possible for us. I mean, we're coming up on, this is our 24th year of marriage, and I would say it's the best we've ever been. And the deepness of our love, the connection, the respect for space and privacy. And then I think the other thing about being out here is life is quiet. So if you're having thoughts, you have time to go, wait, why am I thinking this? If you're having thoughts, you can go and sit and go, okay, why am I feeling a certain way? What is going on here that I didn't know was even possible in my other life?
Yeah, you didn't have the time for it.
I didn't. And honestly, if I did have the time, I was going to fill it so I didn't have to do it. Right? Like, I mean, it's not like I didn't know I should be working on me. I didn't know that I had strengths and weaknesses. But maybe I just wasn't ready to work on them. And out here, what else are you going to do some days?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're forced to live with yourself.
Yeah.
Because you do have that luxury to get to know yourself so much better.
And once you get to know yourself, it's so much more fun to know other people, right? And like I think about that a lot. If I'm not in love with myself, if I'm not listening to myself, if I'm not exploring my own emotions, my own thoughts, my highs and my lows, well, then you're only really meeting a percentage of me, the percentage I want to put out. Mm-hmm. But if I explore all that, then I can show up more wholly, right? Because I'm working through. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm not trying to hold a status for anybody. I'm as flawed as everybody else, but I'm working on it.
And for those listening to the podcast today, Jerrod is the kind of friend that when I call, if he answers the phone, he gives me his full attention, and we may talk on the phone for an hour, which is kind of unheard of with most of my other male friends.
Sure.
My friends from, my college friends, my friends from my adulthood, we're lucky to touch base. I'm lucky to touch base with them every 3 months, some of them 6 months, and usually it's a couple texts here and there, and then, it's great when you're back together. But the ability to find presence and attention and be right there to connect and have a conversation, is that something that you noticed that you developed, or is that something you think you had in you just waiting to come out?
No, I think it's this lifestyle. I think it's getting away from the just busy to be busy. The busy is being able to tell you that I'm so busy, I don't have time to talk to you today is a status symbol, or, oh, he's so busy, I can't bother him. No, I think this lifestyle, because, Andrea and I will go maybe a week, 2 weeks without seeing a whole lot of other people, that if our paths do cross, okay, they're crossing for a reason. And one of the things I think about is we're both in motion. You and Mel are in motion in a bus. Andrea and I are in motion. There's a lot of routes we can pick in the world, a lot of places we can go. The fact that both of our vehicles in motion picked the same route at the same time and crossed, I should be curious about this. Mm-hmm. And the only way I can truly learn and feel who you are and see what's there is if I'm not staring at my phone, I'm not distracted, and I really give you the attention. And I just think it's something that probably subconsciously I missed in my life, is talking to people, but they're not really listening. And I just want to make sure that I value people, and that if they know that our paths cross, they're going to feel valued and mattered at the time we're together.
Yeah, you recently did an interview with Northwest Nomads.
Yeah.
I forget the couple's name.
Ashley and Jordan.
Ashley and Jordan, yeah. And that's the thing you're saying, like, when you live nomadically and things happen or paths cross, you should take note. That's another aspect that I don't know if we should dive into, but there's a spiritual aspect to your beliefs that you don't really hammer in, and it's not something that's like top note. It's not something that you push out to other people. It's a belief that you're meeting these people as mentors to guide you.
Yeah.
It's a belief that you're running into people and there's probably a reason behind this or that. Is that something you had as you were growing up as well?
I think it's become more redefined, but yeah, it's definitely been there. Like I've always, and my kids will tell you this, I always talk to the grocery store clerks. I talk to the waiters, the waitresses. I talk to everybody because I don't believe that we're here on accident. Right. And it's, I mean, like, honestly, even when I went to Costa Rica, one of the first phrases I wanted to learn was, ¿Cuál es tu favorita? So that I could literally ask the waiters and waitresses, what is their favorite thing at this restaurant? Because if it's their favorite thing, I should try it. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to know. And it's just, again, man, like we just go through the motions of life. And what I've seen and what I was always hyper aware of is how many people die not living the life they wanted to live. How many people die with so much more to give, whether it's their musical talent, writing, singing, or just loving their family. But they held back. They were so busy. And I just didn't want that. So I wanted to go the opposite. If I get in your line at the store, I'm going to call you by your name because I'm going to look at your name tag and say, hey, Johnny, Billy, Mary, how's your day going? Because we're only going to be there 10 seconds. But it doesn't take any extra effort for me to call you by name and let you know I see you as a human and I appreciate you being here so that I could get groceries. And that's one of the things that I hope when people meet my kids, that they understand that my kids were raised that way, that there's nobody should be invisible to us. And I think if we all really spent our days trying to make sure we didn't cross paths with people and they felt invisible in our presence, the world would be better. And maybe that's a Rose's lens look at the world, but I believe it. And I can't make everybody do it, but I can definitely make sure that me and the people that I'm close to, that I have influence over, if you cross our paths, you're going to know you were seen for that minute or that hour or the day or the week we're together.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely touched both mine and Mella's lives. Getting to know you guys and inspiring us and having this new richness with our friendship. And I think in solving the world's problems there.
We've had fun solving them over a good baked good. Right? Yeah. That's one of the things I love. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed with you guys is the depth of conversation and getting past the surface level of what do you do and what's the status and is there a pecking order here, and just really when we first met, we didn't know how long our time together would be. So you really get past a lot of the superficial stuff to be like, okay, what kind of people are these people? Can I learn? Can I give? Can we share? Because we're so intentional with things.
Yeah. Because we're doing things on purpose.
Yeah, and that actually was my wife's idea for this whole name of the show. See, I'm telling you, this whole Airstream adventure was her idea. This wasn't mine. See, sometimes I'm just like, dude, I just sit back and just enjoy the ride.
Well, Jerrod, it's been a real pleasure getting to dive in a little bit. Our listeners need to get out in the world today. They've spent some time with us. I'm glad that we got to hear some of the thoughts behind the book, the podcast, and some of your personal life. And it's been a real pleasure to try to be a host for a day, which I've never done before, which is a lot of fun.
You did great. Yeah. It's empowering knowing the questions you got, huh? I always like knowing, like, ooh, I got a good question here. I can't wait to get this one up.
I think it could be if I did it more often. Mostly, I'm just trying not to mess it up.
Oh, no, there's no mess ups. I appreciate you reaching out and coming up with this idea. It's super cool to be on the other side, and I just got to say I love you guys, and I'm thankful that our paths cross and that we were both, because it takes both people to be at a certain spot to be open, right? Because our paths meet, either of us are having a bad day, either of us are dealing with breakdowns or we're not willing to listen or something. That goes a whole different way.
Oh, yeah.
So I thank you guys for being who you are, and we're blessed to have you in our lives.
Yeah, well, we love you guys too, and we're glad we can spend more time with you for a week or so here.
Awesome.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.